Okay, last session. And then we will have Minister of Economy conclusion of the conference. And the last session will be on mobile security. And I would like to, the moderator of this panel will be Arik Mimran, Vice President of Qualcomm and in charge of the activity here in Israel. Arik is here. Okay.
Hey. Thanks everyone for that stayed here for this last session. But just before we start with this last session, which will be before the closing remarks sessions, I want to have a short poll amongst the people who stayed here. So bear with me just a second. And before I'll present our panelists today. So as we all know, our mobile phone is becoming more and more part of our main communication and computing engine. And we see a shift from the desktops to the laptops and tablets to the smartphone, which is becoming more and more our computing and communication. So after you read this question, I'll have one option that is agree and the other one that is disagree. So the question is, do you really think that this shift actually is a game changer, which means that we need to change, for example, our approach to security solution. We need to add things. We need to do things differently. We need to increase our investments. Or, hey, we have security in those platforms. Why do we need to invent anything new? Okay? So let me just hit here. I think the page down. So I want to see all the people that agree. Hey, thanks Israel for voting, not for your opinion. All right, we have the agree. Now I want to see, and I'll give you a hint, it's a round number. Now the disagreeing people, I want to see hands. Oh, those are the brave guys. 1, 2, 3. You didn't vote in the agree, right? Good. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so the results are we had 30 people who agreed and 10 that disagreed. So first of all, I'm happy and I'm thankful for this conference, obviously, that probably did something maybe to the people. For those who disagree, I want to hope that after this panel, you'll have a few more ideas and themes to think about. And thanks for voting. For those who didn't vote, I hope that they'll have an opinion soon on this, because in my mind, the mobile and the IoT revolution is happening and probably we need to take action. So with this, let me call our panelists. To the stage. Sit here. So we'll have today actually a variety of persons who represent our mobile industry. As you all know, it is comprised of players, obviously, from the service provider domain, software ISVs, right? Software developers, and obviously chip makers. All these comprise our ecosystem when it comes to mobile. So as our first panelist, we have Wolfgang Hisselrich, who's the Vice President, Global Business Development and Venturing at Deutsche Telekom, a leading global mobile carrier. Then Gal Salomon, the founder and chairman of the board of Discretix, a mobile security technology vendor. Oded Zehavi, the CEO of Kaymera Technologies, developers of secure enterprise mobile phone software. And Asaf Ashkenazi, Director of Product Management at Qualcomm, who leads Qualcomm product in mobile security and works closely with device makers and ecosystem partners like Discretix and Kaymera. So that's interesting. Probably have to stand. This wasn't my plan, but maybe the organizer will be. Okay, so I didn't plan. I had plans to stand here, but I wanted to be part of the panel, by the way. But now it looks all right. Thank you so much. So, Wolfgang, why don't we start with you? Sure. You represent here today a fairly large operator, right? Deutsche Telekom, and I think out of all panelists, you have the biggest view of all the users, variety users represented here actually, but that has visibility to multiple smartphones users. So I'd like to hear, I'd love to hear your take on present state of security in mobile. Can you outline a few trends you're seeing in the network that probably should be addressed by the industry?
Sure. So it's not a small surprise that for us as an operator, the network is key. Yeah? So it's what we all discuss about cloud. When you terminate a call, like everybody knows, it very quickly ends up in our core network. So that's something we definitely need to protect. We talk about mobility, the biggest threat that we see, and the devices. What we see as another trend is that how reckless or thoughtless some of our end customers address it on the consumer space. We have the footprint in Europe mainly and then in the US, that especially in the young generation, there's almost no recognition of a security threat as such. And solutions we detect that are being uploaded that are completely unsecure, they just don't really care. It's a certain threshold you see there, the very young ones, especially when they don't need to spend much money. And then it changes, obviously. So the threshold 30, 35 plus, still consumer enterprise, it's a complete different thing. People recognize that they can be exposed and that they need to secure their devices. So we sell solutions. I can name maybe one, Lookout. It's an American-based company that we partner with. So it's a pure mobile secure device encapsulating a solution, and the run rate is heavily increasing, and that's where we see the development. Here in Israel, we're also partnering with a couple of companies very successfully. Just to mention, we have in Israel, in Beersheba, our technology center, and the focus of Deutsche Telekom in Israel is definitely cybersecurity. Yeah, that's why we are here and want to be even more active. So companies like Severa, Seculet are companies we are looking into, and there are many more. So these are the areas of activities we are looking into. And yeah, coming back to the question, it's multifold, but when we have discussions about security, it's all fine and nice, but our biggest concern is actually our core network and how we can protect it.
Okay, so that's an interesting and refreshing, rather, observation, that security actually is, the interest in security is divided amongst different ages, and we see the interest increasing with the age. You see more, you're saying that you see more and more people or adults that are aware of it lately.
Yeah, okay. Maybe just to add very quickly, we introduced solutions like Office 365. Okay, this is obviously then for enterprise. We started with SME, which is the market segment. And it is still a very hard sell for us in Germany, where customers very quickly ask where their data is hosted. And then you see countries where this is not so much of a concern, and we are more active on the enterprise side.
Okay. Oded, being Kaymera, being actually an expert in mobile security products that are designed for governmental as well as regulated enterprises, which actually are quite exposed to attacks. And traditionally, you are more focused in the high-end devices. Could you give us an example or two for such security threats that would urge the people that disagree that we need to change the game to probably think of taking action?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for having us in this panel. We in Kaymera, when we started looking at the threats that are coming on this very simple and small device, the first thing we identified that this is not just a computer in a form factor that you can put in your pocket. And there are so many different and new threats that was not exist in the PC era, the laptop era. So taking the threats from the PC era will not fit what the demand from the device to the risk for the device itself. I'm willing to give a prediction, which is if 5 years from now, an historian or maybe a reporter will look back on some of the biggest war operations that are happening these days, some of them in our region, he will discover that few of the, or many of the command and control instructions are given on WhatsApp. And on messaging, non-secure messaging apps. An interception of voice, messaging, and data is not science fiction anymore. The barrier to entry for intercepting a voice call or messaging on such a device is something that can happen even remotely on the operator level, on the proximity of the person, or even on with a Trojan horse on the device. And this is a risk that did not exist when it comes to a PC or a laptop. The second thing, and I will not use your exercise on doing a survey and asking how many people have installed flashlight on the devices. I can imagine that more than 50% have done that. And if I will ask how many have installed a type of a caller ID application, probably the numbers will be higher. These very cute, naive applications are really Trojan horses with a license. And if somebody will take a look next time he installs such an app and see which permission he gives to those applications, he will discover that basically request and get access to almost any resource on the device. So your SMSs, your pictures, your contacts are being transferred into the cloud that is controlled by these app developers. So for an enterprise, this is a huge risk and something that he needs to handle carefully. So the bottom line, many risks, you need to look at all of them, and you cannot close a door and leave an open window.
So that's interesting. So it's not only that the Israeli governmental organizations use WhatsApp for some operational purposes. You see that also happening in other locations?
Well, one of my privileges at Kaymera is to travel around the world and meet government organizations in countries that most of you, I'm sure, will avoid. But WhatsApp as an extension of the mobile, and the mobile itself have become an elementary part of our body or our life. And it's not different when you go to Kenya or Mexico or France. The behavior, the mobile device, the main behavior is the same. And the threats are the same. The only difference is the level of sensitivity, and I relate to what was said about the different mentalities and the different cultures. There are cultures that are paranoid by nature. There are cultures that will be paranoid when they will understand the threat.
Okay. So, Gal, first of all, as I think one of the first that came up even with the term of mobile security as something that needs to be addressed, speaking of paradigm shifts. We hear Oded speaking here about software solutions addressing threats. I think it's very interesting to see from Discretix, who treat things at a different layer. What are the use cases that you think are the ones that we need to be aware of?
First, I think from our view, I think we have related from day first that security is something that need to touch with hardware. You can't really change the hardware, you can change the software, and this is why from day first, almost 13 years ago, we decided to build a platform which is separating the main CPU with a dedicated CPU for security. So as of today, I think when smartphone became so popular right now and running an operating system which is basically going to every direction that we're seeing, still the main use cases that we're seeing is content from one side, which is the ability of consume and control content. And this is to a large degree one of the major things that we're doing. The other thing is everything about payment, and payment need to be fast, quick, seamless, something that you are not wasting time and something that you need to control. I think only last week we heard about the iPay from Apple, which I think it's a good starting point. I think the other guys are doing similar things, and we believe that you don't need to carry your credit card with you because you have a mobile phone. You can trust, you can do transaction on the fly with something which is already connected, always connected, and you can trust something which you have in your hand. More so, we believe that given the fact that the mobile phone is something which is with us and something which is personalized to what we would like to see and to have, is use the mobile phone as authentication factor, and authentication for many kind of factors, from going to your network as the enterprise solution, bring your own devices, bringing in new threats, have the ability, the CIO, to trust the phone, which is becoming something which you have an IP address and something which you have a privilege to the network, all the way to, again, connectivity, productivity, consumption of content, and going all the way to payment mechanism.
So it's interesting, but Asaf, we hear here Oded speaking about software solutions to security challenges, and then we hear Gal here saying that hardware is best because it can't be changed. So first I want to ask you, who's right? Who is right? And then what is the promise that Qualcomm as a chip maker brings into the security challenge?
Yes, so both of them are right. We need.
Okay, that's a good answer.
Yes, but let me also say that, you know, I hear a lot. People are talking through this conference, which is excellent, by the way. about the enterprise and how it's important to protect the enterprise. And yes, it is important, but you also need to think about the consumer side. And this is something, when you're talking about the mobile phone, the smartphone, this is something that touches every one of you that in the audience. Not just for the enterprise, also for your data, for your privacy. As Gal said, for the authentication. And yes, maybe today it is, most people don't really afraid or worried that their contacts will leak or some of the other stuff will leak. But we will have payments, we will have authentication, the smartphone will be your ID, your driving license, you will open the door to your house using the smartphone, and this is not science fiction. This is actually happening. In Canada, we have a trial for replacing driving license with the smartphone. You already have alarm systems that allows you to open the door to your house with the smartphone, so it's actually happening. So it touches every one of you. It's not just the enterprise. And we want to make it secure, and also to what Wolfgang said, it needs to be easy. When we are talking about consumer, it needs to work smoothly. I don't subscribe to the notion that the users don't understand security and they are dumb and they don't know how to make it work. No, it's the responsibility of us, of making the one that are providing the security solution, to make it available, approachable to the users, and in a way that it will not interfere and they will just be able to use it. And in order to achieve, going back to your question, in order to achieve both high level of security, but also accessibility and good user experience, you need to have both the hardware and the software.
So I want to return a little bit to the point, Gal, that you made regarding the importance of authentication. How can we speak about authentication when, for example, in Android, we have such a fragmented ecosystem where each one comes with their own part of the solution, and now when it comes to authentication, you need to authenticate users across the board from soup to nuts, I mean all the way, such that you are able to say that this person is the person that can go and make transactions, as just mentioned, and other things. How do we make sure that we have a common language?
So I think it's even more complicated. And I think because if you try to layer the different entities within the mobile phone today, you have the chipset guys, you have the OEMs, and you have a bunch of application providers or apps and the operators. As you can see, in the mobile phone that we all carry today, we are authenticating every step in the way. We're authenticating when you open your WhatsApp, your Facebook, your email, regardless if it's Gmail or whatever have you over there, commerce, payment, Maccabi card, whatever. And I just realized that, you know, the amount of password that you need to remember, it's humongous. It's something which, you know, I'm keep forgetting, and, you know, every second day I'm reset my password here, reset the password there, and I can't remember. So to relate to your question, is authentication is the key here, given the fact that the market is fragmented. You have different OEMs, different operating system, different chipset guys. And from our end at least, the idea was to create a platform which you have a single security question that you need to be asked. And with the password mechanism, which is going to be start from the hardware. And again, this is what we're talking about. The hardware security is the secret that you have inside your CPU, which cannot be tampered and can be exposed only if you're authenticating as the right guy, including the bank of password that you have. And, you know, we have worked with some of you folks on Trust Zone application and other stuff that we're running. And I think as long as we know how to create this safe box, which is embedded within the hardware, which we have a set of algorithms which allowed us to identify who's the right user inside, we will not have any other way or means to control what you have over there. So the idea is to create this kind of a standard, which, by the way, it's started right now. I think Google is pushing right now. FIDO is one of the solutions. You have other solutions as well. There's an authentication mechanism with a bank of password which is going to be reside, and the roots is going to be sit within the hardware.
So Wolfgang, how do we prevent the case where we have, for example, a solution developer from needing to change and alter their solution when, just as Gal mentioned, so when they go from one OEM to another, and they need again and again to change their solution such that it will fit a specific environment. So one solution that Gal mentioned is that to have a common lower layer that everyone can use. But what if some of the people do not use this very same common layer? How do we overcome that?
Before I come to the answer, and just crossed my mind, it was quite unique. We found out that users obviously want to have it very easy, and that's a no-brainer. But also in enterprises, we had lately complaints companies came back and said banks, insurance companies, an airline, and they found out that especially the young talents started to ditch the hardware that was given to them because it was all too clunky, too complex, and too limiting. And they started to use everything out of the box and completely against breaching compliance. Now you can say fire them all. It is only that they then came back and said, yeah, but these are really talented people, and normally they were reasonable, but they were so fed up with the complex layer of security that they did not understand. They understood, but they didn't want to put up with that in a daily life. It was just too cumbersome. And I think that's also a challenge for the industry. How do you make it as easy and as flawless that it's acceptable, but on the other hand, of course, secure, or people will always find a way around it. And I think that we didn't have an answer to that, obviously. We need to take what you guys give us for the time being. But we would like, obviously, to drive this initiative and come back with a feedback in a consolidated way.
Okay. Asaf, what is your take about the need for a common language among the different players?
I think that this is something that is very important. We all need to work together. It's achieving security. It can't be a solution coming from one provider. If somebody asked me if Qualcomm has the answer and to solve all the security problems, of course the answer is no, we don't. We have part of the solution, we have part of the technology, but it needs to be collaboration between different teams, different companies, in different parts of the ecosystem. And standardization, for example, is one of the things to reduce the fragmentation. And as Gal mentioned, there is the FIDO Alliance for authentication. We just announced that Qualcomm joined the FIDO Alliance. We are now part of it, and we support it. And we are also open to contribute some of the layer that we are doing to make it more accessible even to our competitors when necessary. So we really believe that we need to create a solution that will work across platforms and that will involve different parties in the ecosystem.
Well, as you can imagine, standardization takes time. And while we're waiting for the standardization bodies to solve our problems, there are people that are using these devices on a daily basis. The lines between consumers and enterprise or work time or personal time are blurring. I always tell a story about an ex-employee of mine, which, and again, I hope will not reflect on me as a boss, but once she was interviewed to another company, and she was asked, will you take phones off business hours? And I asked her, what did you answer? And she said, what is off business hours? Today, this phone, enterprises are looking to improve the productivity of their employees. They are looking for the employees to use that device off and on business hours, and they need solutions today that are commercially available, that are leveraging the technology that is available today, while taking into account the different threats that are coming into different levels in the organizations. So I think consumers' security and privacy, which is not, by the way, totally similar, is something that is been coming back and forth. But enterprise security is something that is a hot topic and will stay with us for a long time.
So what you're saying, Oded, we hear what users are, or which users are more aware of security challenges. We hear what are the challenges, okay? And we also touched a little bit upon the solutions. But how effective are those software solutions? I mean, when it comes to security attacks. And yes, standardization takes time, and we need to probably start and put some de facto solutions out there. So do we really believe that we can address bad software with good software?
Well, the lines between good software and bad software are blurring, without coming back to many, many other examples about how it becomes very difficult for us as a solution provider to differentiate between bad software and good software. What is important to understand that any solution that is trying to prevent any software to access sensitive resources and to extract data from this device, first of all, of course, needs to have multiple layers, which some of them will be ready to prevent the unknown, or at least to detect the unknown. And this is a huge challenge when it comes to a very small device, with, as mentioned, with a customer that is expecting a frictionless user experience. But for us as a solution providers, the complexity is also relies on the fact that as a software company, we have limited access to a very complex ecosystem. And in order to detect some events that might be important for the security, the risk management of the device, you need to access or reach very low layers of the device, layers that not always available when you come as an application that is trying to prevent a good software or bad software, or even to reach different chipsets in the device that might help us improve the security of the device that are currently controlled either by the operators or by the device manufacturer. So it's a very complex ecosystem, and it's, in the end of the day, probably in the near term, what I see is solutions that will try to limit the threats or to minimize the risk, and not trying to solve this complex, almost infinite problem of having security all around, everywhere, anytime.
So what would you like to see more from the chip makers to have there, so that you can have maybe more portable solutions? That's what I hear from you, okay? The ability to be able to launch your solutions across different platforms?
Well, the mobile industry is highly fragmented. We can speak on other different challenges that industry faces. The fragmentation is across the board on the control of the device, on the access to resources that might be protected by solution vendors. I will give a very simple example of a challenge we have faced trying to scramble the voice coming out of the device. And today the voice is controlled by a different chipset outside of the user space. So for us to reach such a chipset, requires cooperation by more than one player in that industry, which makes this almost impossible. So we are still optimistic, but this is a simple example, and there are many other examples on the payment space, on other spaces. So I agree with Gal that standardization might ease some of this pain, but we are far away from that.
I have two comments here. The first one is related to your question about, what do you need from us, our chip guys? Is first, we need you to be more flexible. I know Asaf for many, many years, and I think we went over a very long way, to start a process with large semiconductor company can take years, up to the point that, you open everything and you expose. So I think part of that is to be more open and to create a platform that you can start working. So this is comment number one. Comment number two was related to bad software, good software. In our case, we're talking about, software is a soft solution. Software solution is a soft solution. And it's always the trade-off between hardware and software, because we're doing a lot of software as well. But what we're doing is mainly embedded, tightly coupled with the hardware. And I think the combination should be which element you need to put in the kernel, not in the user space, and which mechanism you need to build inside in order the application to start seamless. Let me give you some example. When we start the first platform that we have built, which was 2004, was a coprocessor which was designed next to the main CPU. And I remember everyone came to us and said, guys, to do, RSA, 2K keys can take long time because the CPU is not running at the same speed that we have today. And after working 4 years, I think we came to the point that we know how to do Montgomery multiplication in a very, very way that it's seamless. It's taken less than a second. I think what we're facing today in the security space, that the algorithm was changed, optimization was done, significantly running in the main CPU and a DSP combination of hardware. I think this is not going to be the issue. I think the issue is going to be how you can create enough security solution within the kernel in order to create a space that the user can put their own application without damaging the overall security of the phone.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that when it comes to chip makers, it's not only what. Yes, I'll take it as a note. Not only a question of what you need, but also a question of how, right? Wolfgang?
Just a comment why I listened to the discussion. Before I came, I talked to my colleagues in, we call it terminal management. They're the ones who are vetting the new devices, and they are talking to you guys and the others. On the other hand, we realized that the new smartphone wave is smartphones that have a price point between 100 and 120 euros. So we do realize that the whole thing needs to be affordable, yeah? And that's now the development. Yeah? The gap between what's possible and security costs more and needs to be tightly integrated between hardware and software and the different players. When it comes to the point and how much does it cost and how does it fit to what we can actually sell into the market, the gap starts to be wider and wider.
Okay, so let's touch a little bit about on privacy. Wolfgang, we hear more and more examples of the users' privacy being compromised. What do you think should be done in order to protect users from this happening?
Well, first, from a legislation point of view, I come from a country where data privacy and data security laws are very strict, and they often limit us actually to propose certain solution, not only to enterprises, but actually now more and more even to consumers. And then we are selling into markets where this is less of a challenge. I think all in all, it needs to be the awareness. Yeah, we are driving big campaigns. Deutsche Telekom is a household brand, not only in Germany, and everybody has his unique selling point. Our unique selling point is that we believe we provide very secure services. And that also means that the threshold, the hurdle to overcome to be listed as a partner is a little bit higher. So we give everybody a bit of a hard time, and we tend to prefer solutions that we really fully understand and have been able to vet and to check upon. And even I personally have been guided through data centers. No clue what I saw, but that was part of the program, yeah, that people really want to get the assurance that what we provide as an operator, the combined solution, also the partnering solution, is something that they can trust. So I think the key point is awareness on the one hand, and the other side, it is the organization I'm part of, how we actually do the overall partnering and business development activities in terms of making solutions secure.
So awareness. What are you suggesting, Wolfgang? That we as users of smartphones for cameras, right, using the cameras and recording things and even taking videos of stuff, we just need to stop doing this? What do you mean by being aware?
Yeah, that's out of question. I mean, obviously, yeah, that is part of the fun, that is part of our being in the industry, yeah, so you cannot stop it. It is just like that once the user knows what is possible to a certain extent, yeah, that he will either demand that what we bring to the table is secure, or, to pick up the argument that just brought in, they are willing to pay a little bit more. Yeah, that they actually understand that it comes with a price point, that the industry does the heavy lifting in order to provide security, and this security needs to be paid for. So there's nothing like a free lunch, and all the apps cannot be free. There, if it's free, then you as a customer pay for it with your data, obviously, and that is something we need to drive through the mindset to shape that awareness. That's what I meant.
Well, without ignoring the latest incident, which I'm happy that we succeeded almost speaking for an hour without discussing too much nude celebrity pictures. In fact, every day, each one of us is really letting his privacy go away by sharing information with vendors that potentially improve our lives. Okay, every one of us is sharing his location data with Waze because he believes Waze will help us get faster between one point to the other. Most of us are sharing a lot of personal data because we believe we'll get better offers and better promotions. And this is something that has become the fact. You cannot ignore it. We cannot go back. And asking the user to be proactive and be part of the prevention of those incidents is something that in practically that will not work. So there is a balance, and there will always a balance between security and usability. And this is a very delicate game which will go on, and I'm not sure there is a silver bullet that will solve that paradigm. But incidents like the celebrity picture leakage, probably something that will increase awareness and will help vendors, or will push vendors to invest more efforts in securing some of these personal data. But in the end of the day, when it comes to consumers, privacy is almost dead.
I have a short comment. I don't really understand the question. From my end, I mean, we lost our privacy. We don't have any privacy. when we started to use Google Maps or Waze, as you mentioned, or your Facebook, Instagram, I mean, we gave up. And it's kind of sad that we have came to the point that we want to consume service, but the price for getting service for free is basically expose yourself to whatever you want. So at least from my end, and I know I'm talking with my kids, and there are uploads, picture, location, whatever. Plus the fact that, you know, if you're taking the Googles of the world, I mean, they have big data which is running on every step in the way that we're doing, including our emails, and try to understand what we're doing, what we're looking for. So privacy does not exist. Privacy is dead.
But they're doing it voluntarily. You can always, you know, choose not to do that. Asaf, Wolfgang touched a little bit on the legislation of our privacy, right? So, and we hear that we practically have no privacy, right, from Gal. Is there anything from the mobile side that the chipmakers can offer such that our privacy will increase? Right, we hear states in the U.S., for example, coming and legislating rules of, you know, at least stopping some of the information from being leaked in several cases. Can you state your opinion on that?
Sure. So first on all this privacy, I have a very strong opinion, which is if the user decided to give its privacy in return for some benefit, this is okay. This is the user's decision. But I want to make sure that in the products that we are building, if somebody doesn't approve it, doesn't want it, then the information will remain in the device and will not be accessible to entities or malicious entities that are not supposed to get this data. So I can give you a few examples. The first one, back to the authentication. Yeah, it's true. There are many online services that will ask for or ask you to authenticate yourself with the biometric information. But when you do the authentication, the biometric information itself is stored securely in the device. It never leaves the device. It just tells you, yes, it is Arik, or it's not, but your fingerprint, your iris scan will not go out. The other thing is that you touch on legislation, which is very interesting. There is the anti-theft and kill switch, and a lot of legislation that is happening now in the US, and I believe that it will go and will spread to other countries in the world. So when your device is stolen, there are two things that you want to do. The first is to be able to disable it, so nobody will be able to use it. And they will have any tool that they are using to do factory reset or other, they will not be able to disable it. And that the data, your data on the device will not be compromised. Because today, you know, you probably, all of you know, that when you delete a file in your device, it's not really deleted, right? I'm sure you know it. It's still there. Anyone that have access to the memory can get all your files. So this is one example that we are doing by encrypting the files that you're storing with a unique key that is stored in the device. And speaking about privacy, this key is not available to anyone. Not Qualcomm, we don't know this key. This key is generated internal in the chip. Not the user, no one knows about these keys and can associate it to you with the keys. So we protect your data if your device is stolen. And also, as part of what we announced in this conference, our anti-theft solution, we also have a mechanism to make sure that when you initiate the technology, when you activate the technology, the device basically becomes a brick and nobody can use it. And only you, as the authorized user, can reverse this operation.
But will this really prevent the theft? Because only after you stole the phone, it is where you start seeing that you might have challenges breaking it. So what's the point?
Yeah, excellent question. So I like to give examples from history, and this is probably for some will be far history, when you have like car stereos and tape stereos again in the car. And if you remember, in the 80s, this was like terrible, because there were a lot of cars being broken, the thieves broke into a car to steal the stereo, right? If you ask younger people today, if they know about something like this, they will say, what are you talking about? Nobody breaks into your car to take your radio. They solved the problem because they made the radio, the car stereo, useless for thieves. So this is what we want to do. If you will know, as a potential criminal that wants to take my device, that you have absolutely no way to sell it, why would you steal it? Why would you take the risk? So it's true that it will take time, but the result will be actually, and you will be able to see it, in dropping in phone theft to a level that nobody would like to or have any incentive to steal your phone.
Okay, thank you. So just before I asked one concluding question to wrap our panel here, we touched, I think, on at least the main layers of mobile security, from hardware through software and expected user experience. So just before we wrap up here, what is your message to the industry regarding when it comes to mobile security? We'll start with you, Gal.
Tough question. I think the message, at least...
What is the one takeaway that you want people to take from this mobile security panel today?
I think the one takeaway, don't trust what you have in your hand. This is, I think we demonstrate so many times that we can take the most sophisticated phone that exists and we're able to expose any kind of information. So if you want to make sure that you are not exposing, don't put it in your phone, because it's, at least in the Android domain, it's widely open.
That's a very strong message to end up with. Asaf, I specifically want to hear your opinion on this message of, hey, just don't put things that you matter about on your mobile or smartphone.
Well, what Gal said, it's very similar to say, don't ever drive a car, right? Because you can have an accident and you can die, right? So I'm saying the same thing. Use your smartphone. It's a wonderful thing, wonderful technology. But be aware of the risks. Be aware that there are risks. And part of my message to the industry is start looking at these risks. This risk is also a great business opportunity to start developing technologies that will run on these devices.
Oded?
So I will say that we are beyond the option not to use the devices. Restricting a device is as restricting part of our brain. And nobody will ever think he can restrict a part of his brain, and the devices are not far from that. There is a way to minimize dramatically the risk when it comes to sensitive data and to sensitive part of your organization. There are solutions are available in the market as long as you will evaluate, understand the risk, evaluate the needs, and understand the user experience implications on that employee, you can succeed in still maintaining the expected productivity while having a secure environment in place.
Okay, so here we can do that. So just before I give you one last chance to change your mind, Gal, no, I'm just joking. Wolfgang, your message to the crowd.
It's 3 against 1, Gala. Otherwise I have nothing to sell. Come on, give me a break. The message to the industry would be the statement: it needs to be affordable, and it needs to be easy to handle. This is actually the homework you guys need to solve, and then we can hopefully make that segment grow, also in countries where Deutsche Telekom is present, which are very few emerging markets. And of course, the smartphone thing, unsurprisingly, is where we still want to grow, and we rely on you.
Okay, so I want to thank you so much, folks. Wolfgang from Deutsche Telekom, Gal from Discretix, Oded, Kaymera, and Asaf from Qualcomm. Thank you very much, guys.
I have good news and bad news. I've just got a call from Minister of Economy who apologized, but due to some unexpected, I don't know what, he cannot come. And the good news that we reached the end. So those of you who participate tomorrow in the round tables are invited. We started, I think, convening at 8 and starting at 8:30. And those of you who are invited to the cocktails that we have, we'll meet you there. Thank you.